Do you say it's not been proven that there were 48 illegal machine guns and a bunch of illegal hand grenades on his compound?
I believe there were 48 illegal automatic weapons on April the 19th. I don't know that that's the case on February 28th, sir.
I see, but there were weapons there.
Yes.
How about hand grenades? Was there testimony about that? Or were they just...
I don't know. I don't recall that.
Do you recall, Mr. DeGuerin?
No, I don't know anything.
Even though you know every other detail about the trial.
That's not fair, Mr. Schumer.
Do you doubt that there were 48 illegal weapons and hand grenades
I've never said
there?
I knew all the details of the trial.
Do you
I've
doubt
never
that?
said
I'm asking you that
peaceful.
right now, sir.
What is your question?
My question is, do you have doubts that Mr. Koresh had on his compound illegal weapons and illegal hand grenades? Do you have any doubts about that?
No, he told me he had illegal weapons.
Do you have
there. He
doubts
did not tell me that he had hand grenades there.
I see.
And I saw no hand grenades. I did see some grenades that the ATF had thrown in, and I brought one out.
What do you mean thrown in?
The ATF threw in grenades in their dynamic
entry. They didn't throw any grenades in, as I understand it.
I brought one out.
They were flashbacks. They did
Have
not
you ever seen
explode.
what a flashbang can do to somebody? It's a grenade. It has an explosive charge in it. It's very dangerous. It can blow your hand off. It can blow your face off. It can kill. I would have brought out some of the unexpended grenades that the ATF threw in, but I was worried about bringing out a live grenade, so I left them there. There were a number of grenades.
Okay, Mr. DeGuerin, I think that would hamper your credibility because you're the first person who would say that those were grenades. I've never really sat through a hearing the likes of yesterday. This idea of the FBI having hand grenades, not flashbangs, but hand grenades. And finally, coup de grace, Mr. DeGuerin said flashbangers can kill, injure, maim. Anyone who knows anything about these things knows they can't.
Mr. Kavanaugh, I have in my hand here a amount of Play-Doh. Mr. Bush, if you could, this is just standard Play-Doh. If that were a flashbang grenade or a stun grenade, the same thing, which was live, which pin had been pulled, would you feel comfortable just holding that in your hand?
Well, Mr. Barr, a flashbang grenade, my answer is no. I would not want to hold it.
Those are classified as destructive devices under 26 U.S.C. Section 5845F, aren't they?
Yes, sir, they are.
That they can kill people. Is that true?
Certainly, yes, sir.
Well, a gentleman by the name of Warren L. Parker, an explosives enforcement officer, Bureau of ATF, on May 11, 1994, in court, said under oath that they are designed to help kill the suspect while not endangering the law enforcement officer.
According to the ATF, their men pull up to Mount Carmel, pile out of their cattle trailers, went running towards the door, guns pointed, shouting, "Police, search warrant, lay down." According to them, David was standing at the front door unarmed, and he shut the door when they started running towards him. And the next thing the ATF knew, it says, it was receiving gunfire from inside of Mount Carmel, in particular from behind that front door.
He knew law enforcement was coming, and he was so diabolical that he laid an ambush.
David Koresh expresses this. He says in this tape that he went out on his porch. He said, "Stop, there's women and children in here," and a shot rang out and hit the door to the right. That door, he says, kicked.
I went running down the hall and found Perry Jones laying in the hall, screaming that he'd been shot. Perry Jones was in his 60s. He was unarmed, as was David Koresh. When they went to the front door, both were shot in the area of the front door. David was shot in the wrist. Perry Jones was shot in the stomach.
And then he says, "If you don't believe me, look at the videotape. I know you have that tape," he says. "I saw you making it across the road."
According to the agency, there were 3 or 4 video cameras pointed at the front door that could tell you everything that happened at the front door of that building that day. They claim they can't find a single one of them. Every one of those videotapes vanished.
If the Branch Davidians intended to ambush those people with 48 machine guns and 50 caliber machine guns, and they came up in unprotected cattle cars with nothing but tarps on them, they would have blown them away. So that convinced us that they did not, that is, the Davidians did not fire first.
I sat by that door for several hours. I went in and out of that door 10 times, and I saw the bullet holes on the door on the right side. Almost every bullet hole was an incoming round. And what I mean by that, it's a metal door. You could easily tell that the bullets were incoming rounds. They were punched in. Now, I'm not the Marine expert that Jack Zimmerman is, but I've been hunting since I was 10 years old, and I know a bullet hole when I see it. And those were bullet holes that were punched in.
Of course, the majority of bullet holes would be going in that direction because the Davidians are not going to keep the door closed and shoot through it.
What you need to find is the videotape that was made of the raid. It disappeared. What you need to get is the photographs of the front that are similar to the one that's being displayed right now. Now, you have the power to get that evidence, and you ought to get it.
That is not fair. That is not a proceeding that is right. If we want to go over the issue of who fired first, then we should... Wait a second. I'd like to finish my point.
That's not a point of order.
It is a point of order.
It is not a point of order. You are out of order.
Zimmerman.
I will just make one comment to the witnesses relative to the videotape in the front door. We have consistently asked as a committee to get a copy of a videotape, which they now say is blank. We have asked for the door, and the door is missing.
By noon, Mount Carmel was a tinderbox. A heavy layer of dried CS dust coated everything inside. Large amounts of kerosene and Coleman fuel from containers crushed by armored vehicles saturated the floor. Vapors from methylene chloride, kerosene, and Coleman gas filled the air. Huge holes ripped open by the tanks let the 25-mile-per-hour Waco wind blow completely through Mount Carmel.
When the governmental agency made a decision to breach holes into the building, they set up a configuration of a pot-bellied stove. You wanted to burn slow, you close off the vents. If you wanted to burn fast, you open it up. Well, they made a configuration in that building that was consistent to a pot-bellied stove. Any type of fire that would start, even if there was no CS gas, if there was no flammable liquids, if there was nothing just but ordinary combustible materials. Once you have a fire incipient in a building like that, it's going to grow to a fast, rapid propagation because of the venting.
Earlier in an opening I gave this morning with regard to the Posse Comitatus Act, just to refresh my colleagues' memories, the Posse Comitatus statute is a criminal statute that states that it's a crime to use any part of the Army or Air Force to enforce the laws of the land unless authorized by Congress or the Constitution.
There is, in my judgment, it is absolutely clear that no law was violated. No action was taken that comes close to violating Posse Comitatus or any other law. General Huffman, do you agree with that?
Congressman, so far as the Army's involvement in this, I would say that is correct.
Yes, question about the Army Delta anti-terrorist team or any other military operational asset?
The question is, are we getting any help from the military?
The Delta team specifically.
The question is, are we getting help from the Delta team? And we're not.
In mid-March 1993, I attended a senior executive staff meeting at CIA headquarters, and it involved senior agency management along with the liaison officers from the U.S. military, in particular from Delta Group. The briefing centered on Delta's operations in Waco, Texas.
This previously classified military document confirms the presence of Delta Force at Mount Carmel. With approval of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an observer was deployed to the scene on March 21, 1993, accompanied by 3 other operators also characterized as observers.
One particular soldier was questioned by a member of the hearing and pressed and pressed. He did not want to reveal even the existence of Delta Force and finally had to admit that they were present.
Originally, I was told that there was just going to be 1 or 2 Delta personnel there as observers, but during the briefing, it was mentioned that there was over 10 Delta operators at Waco, Texas, and they were not there merely as observers, but would be participating in any type of operational or tactical effort against the Branch Davidians.
And we, in fact, received anonymous phone calls from Justice Department managers and attorneys who believed that pressure was placed on Janet Reno by Webb Hubbell and pressure that came from the First Lady of the United States. Now, we believed that because the military was present at Waco in some capacity, that the president may have made a decision to allow that to happen following some sort of a legal protocol where he says this is of such a serious nature they need to be involved. And we asked for those documents and asked to see National Security Council documents, and were not provided with any information that enabled us to reach a conclusion.
It's a serious allegation that the president interfered with, changed, moved up the decision. And we can't just bandy these things around unless we have some real evidence.
If Combat Applications Group was on the ground that day, actually pulling triggers, the origin of that operation would have come directly from the White House. It would have come from the president, because Combat Applications Group is, for all intents and purposes, the president's private army.
It was discussed at the meeting that the senior levels of the Clinton administration had authorized Delta to be deployed to Waco, Texas, and not just 2 or 3 people deployed there, but enough people there to get the job done.
Federal law enforcement officers obviously did make some tactical errors prior to and during this tragic incident, and I hope this body, somebody, holds them accountable. Please, I'm pleading with you, somebody out there in the federal government still screwed up big time, okay? But they didn't start this fire.
Based upon the ATF's arson investigation, accelerants were used at all points of origin of the fire.
There's no disagreement between us that this fire was intentionally started inside the compound by the people in there using flammable liquids as accelerants.
I feel better if I could go in and got him out without him. Yes. They didn't want him to come out, they wanted to kill him.
Fire was just going on and on. We realized nobody came out, thinking maybe my husband didn't get out, but my children got out. Horrible, horrible way to die. I try not to think about it because I keep thinking at some point they felt all that heat. I kept thinking the people in the square, they were the ones who maybe they probably killed Cook to death. I think it was to be this tragedy to show what kind of a people we have.
As soon as the Branch Davidian Star David flag had fluttered to the ground, they ran the ATF flag up on that flagpole as a symbol of a military conquest, because the whole world saw this as a symbol that the battle was over.
The arson report fails to identify the specific instruments used to ignite the fires or the individuals that might have used those instruments. As a result, no arson charges were ever filed against any of the Branch Davidians. What is not covered in the arson report is the presence of the government's own pyrotechnic devices at the points of origin of the fire. This flashbang device, for example, was found in the rubble of the dining room.
The flash that results as the detonation of this charge can cause a fire in any area where there is a high concentration of volatile vapors.
In the evidence locker, there are 6 pyrotechnic flashbang grenades mislabeled as silencers or gun parts. According to the Texas Department of Public Safety, they were found in the southwest corner of the building, the dining room, and the chapel, all 3 points of origin of the fire.
Now, maybe the government, the FBI, the ATF did some wrong things, but they didn't light the fire. They didn't start the fire. That is not one of these questions that is very debatable.
The record of the Waco incident documents mistakes. What the record from Waco does not evidence, however, is any improper motive or intent on the part of law enforcement. David Koresh and the Davidians set fire to themselves and committed suicide. The government did not do that.
That assertion to me that the media and that the government has made a kind of blanket declaration that the Branch Davidians committed, quote, mass suicide, to equate it to a Jonestown, Guyana suicide, is the most irresponsible statement that can be attributed to anything having to do with the Waco incident. And I find it very offending to me, and offensive to the memory of the Davidians and everyone else involved in this tragedy, to wrap it up in a nice, clean, well, it was just a mass suicide, end of story, because it was far from it.